Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 29 coverage of the Zurich 1953 Candidates Tournament. I didn't give the standings at the end of round 28, but just to update you, Smyslov is still in a clear first place, 2 points ahead of the field, and he only needs a draw to clinch the tournament, which he gets this round, not to kill the suspense, but it was a quick draw in 11 moves with Najdorf. So it's really a fight for second place at this point. In the previous round in the game, we looked at Bronstein defeated Reshevsky, so that put Bronstein in clear second and Reshevsky a full point behind, with Paul Keres a half point behind Bronstein, so in between the two of them. So it's Bronstein, Keres, Reshevsky in that order. And the first time that Reshevsky has not been in first or second place in this tournament for quite a while. But in this round, Bronstein has his bye, so he's not playing this round. So Reshevsky has a chance to catch up. Keres is only half point ahead of him, and Bronstein not playing. So I wanted to take a look at this game. It's between Samuel Reshevsky and Svetozar Gligoric from Yugoslavia with the black pieces. Reshevsky kicks off with d4, and Gligoric was a great proponent of the King's Indian defense. So that's what we get here, g6, the King's Indian. And Reshevsky replies g3. This is a line which you don't see so much nowadays, but is actually quite a solid line, and it keeps an advantage for white. So it's an interesting way to avoid some of the more common moves today. The main line these days is the classical variation with knight to c3 and pawn to e4, just trying to build up a big center. But g3 is a slower way of going, but it avoids some of the sharper lines, so an interesting way to play. Bishop g2. So both sides are playing normal developing moves. Knight c3, d6, knight f3, just getting their pieces out, getting things set up. There's a choice here. Gligoric decides to play with the c5 here, which is one setup you can go for. There are a number of other ways to go. Actually, the most popular move here is knight c6, a bit surprising in that it blocks the c-pawn, but the intent is to play e5 and not advance the c-pawn. There's also the flexible move knight b to d7, allowing either c5 or e5, or just the move c6 is also played here, also with the flexible setup, allowing either e5 in the future or even a d5. So a lot of different ways to play. Gligoric chooses c5. And Reshevsky, there's two replies that white has in this position. He can just castle and leave the tension in the center, or he can push on with d5 and grab the space, and that's what Reshevsky plays. Now knight a6 is one of the main replies here. This knight is going to reroute to a good square on c7. And white usually castles here, but Reshevsky has some different ideas about how to play this opening. Castling is a good move. Also, e4 can be played here. But he plays the move knight d2. And now this knight goes to c7. And that's what I wanted to say about this move, is that there's two breaks for black in this position. There's a pawn to b5 and pawn to e6. This knight on c7 supports both of those breaks. So it's a very interesting, a very flexible move here, and useful in either plan. In fact, these moves are played together. It's just two different ways of attacking white's central pawn formation. So usually both of those moves will end up getting played by black. It's just a question of which order they're played in. Reshevsky goes queen c2, rook b8, signaling the intention to play the b5 break. Reshevsky responds with b3, supporting the pawn, also preparing bishop to b2, getting this bishop on a good diagonal. So we see that happening, b5, bishop b2, and now Gligoric takes on c4. And now we can see one of the points of this move, knight to d2, which Reshevsky had played earlier when I said normally white castles. He can now take back this pawn with a knight. So he's got an interesting knight maneuver in mind. It's funny because I would have expected just to take back with a pawn. But this pawn formation is still a bit fragile and can be undermined with e6. So this taking with the knight is an interesting way to play, and then this d-pawn is going to be supported with pieces. So we'll see how this works out. Bishop goes to a6, and the knight drops back to e3. If we back up just a move, there was an interesting tactical opportunity the white had here, but it's an example of a tactic that backfires on you. So the idea is knight to a5, threatening to come into c6 and fork those two pieces. Now it's one of those moves that white could just ignore it. And let's go ahead and put it on knight a5. But actually it's safe for black to take the pawn here. This was leaving the pawn underdefended. And now if white tries to execute his threat of forking the queen and the rook, black has a nice move, a counter fork, as it were. Knight to b4 hits the queen and also hits the knight. So if the queen moves, he can just trade off the knight and then be a pawn up. And if knight takes knight is played, then pawn takes, and he's also a pawn up. So black has just snagged a pawn in this line. So anyway, that's why that move was not played. Reshevsky was not tempted to play that tactic. He just retreated his knight to e3, where it defends the d pawn, and that was, I'm sure, his plan all along with this knight maneuver. Okay, rook to b4. Gligoric activates his rook on a forward square, looking at the fourth rank here. White finally castles, and queen to d7. So h3, grabbing control of this g4 square here. Don't want a piece showing up there uninvited. Now rook to b8. So Gligoric has doubled on the b file and is putting some pressure here. There's actually a threat in this position to push the c pawn forward and undermine the b pawn here. The pawn can't take because the bishop would be hanging. So Reshevsky deals with this by playing rook to b1, defending the bishop, and now queen to c8. It no longer works to push this pawn forward. Actually, it's safe for white to just take it, or even play bishop a1. So king to h2, and now at this point, Gligoric seems to have run out of ideas. He's kind of optimized all his pieces, and he spends the next few moves kind of just moving his knights back and forth. There is one idea here that Chess Engine has, playing knight to d7, and then say rook to c1, like was played in the game, continuing with f5 and trying to maybe open up things on the king side, opening a second front, also making use of this rook on the fourth rank there. So that would have been an interesting way to play. Anyway, yeah, Gligoric seemed to run out of ideas at this point and kind of shuffles his knights around. He starts with knight c to e8. Reshevsky plays bishop a3. One of the ideas, actually, just to be fair, one of the ideas of moving the knight out of the way may have been to get some pressure on the c file and try and renew the idea of pushing the pawn to c4. So it just doesn't work out. Reshevsky kicks the rook drops back, and now he brings another rook over to the c file. And he's got things well under control here. Now the queen goes to d8, and the knight goes to a4. This also is a bit of a mysterious move. Maybe he was thinking at the time of rerouting the knight via b2 to c4, possibly. It's hard to see where else it's going from this square. It's looking at squares that are well controlled by black. Well, I guess if Gligoric wastes a few moves, Reshevsky can waste some moves with his knights as well. The knight ends up coming back to c3 after a few moves. So anyway, Gligoric continues his knight maneuvers, knight d7. Now this bishop comes up to e4. Reshevsky decides at this point he would like to get rid of the light-squared bishop, so he's doing this kind of maneuver with his bishop. Okay, knight to c7 was played. Yeah, and that's that knight that went to e8 a few moves back, is back on c7 where it was. Bishop to b2. This is a good diagonal for the bishop opposing the dark-squared bishop here, and now this knight goes back to f6. So both knights have gone back and forth. This one went to d7 and back, and this one went to e8 and back. So in spite of this, the position is still about even. I think this is the kind of it's one of those positions where tempos don't seem to matter so much. It's not entirely closed. It's semi-open, I guess you call it, because there's a half-open file here and a half-open file here, but no immediate breakthrough. So it seems like those losses of time are not so critical in this particular position. Anyway, Reshevsky plays bishop d3. This is his plan to trade off the bishop here. And also, in a funny way, still defending the d-pawn. It looks at the moment as if it's attacked twice and only defended once. Attacked once. Yeah, attacked twice and only defended once. I said that right. But this knight has got double duty. It also has to defend the bishop over here, so it can't do both. So in fact, this pawn is still perfectly safe. So bishop to h6 was played by Gligoric, now really threatening to take that pawn because he's pinning this knight against the rook. So Reshevsky breaks the pin with f4. Queen goes to d7. And now the knight goes back to c3. So Reshevsky did a knight back and forth maneuver as well. And right here, Gligoric makes a mistake, although it's kind of a subtle mistake. The chess engine is recommending exchanging the bishop. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and then playing the move e6. What Gligoric played was e6 immediately. And just a very natural move in this position. It's what you always want to do, try and undermine your opponent's center in these games, in these types of positions. And it's just that there's one move that White has here which is quite strong, and Reshevsky finds it. And it's typical of Reshevsky that he really liked to calculate. He would spend a long time at the board on any particular position if he felt that he could find something. And he often got into time trouble as a result. But so this is a very typical Reshevsky move. He spent a lot of time looking at this position, calculated deeply, and found a very interesting move. So and a strong move. It's actually winning for White. So if you can take a look at this position, see how carefully you can analyze what's going on here. See if you can find a move for White. And the one hint is look for forcing moves. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Reshevsky played the move knight e4. And if you think about it, this really is one of the most forcing moves, so it's a natural one to start your calculation with. But can you really figure out why this is such a good move? Anyway, the reason it's forcing is it's attacking an unprotected knight. So something has to be done about that. And if White is allowed to take that knight, it's a monster fork. It forks the king and the queen. So it's a big threat. And it turns out that the only defense to that threat is to take the knight. But so to understand this tactic, you have to understand why just a simple retreating move doesn't work. You might like to just drop this knight back to e8, still defending the f6 square. But if you play that knight to e8, then the move knight to g4 is possible. And now there's two pieces going into f6. So we've once again renewed the threat of knight f6 forking the king and the queen. Now if the bishop comes here to protect, you can trade off the bishop. King takes. And then queen here, check. And once again, got another piece looking at this f6 square. If the king drops back to g8, you've got that fork. So the king has to go all the way back to f8. And now the queen can invade to h8, and this is a winning attack for White. The chess engine says the best way to proceed is actually the check is like the second or third choice. It says the top choice is to first take here, opening things up, and then coming in with knight g5, kicking the queen. Queen goes to d7. Exchanging off the bishop, sort of like clearing the way, and then finally dropping in here with the queen, and looks like a pretty dangerous attack. The rooks can come up and over and cover these escape squares for the king, and White just has a winning attack from this position. So that's one point of this knight e4 move. You can't really retreat that knight, or it's just losing. So the only move to stay in the game is to take. And White takes back. And now this reveals the second point of the combination, which is the bishop here has a double threat now. And also this is why bishop takes d3 before playing e6 would have saved the game. But this double threat is the bishop is looking at the rook through this pawn, and pawn takes pawn is threatened to attack the queen. So to deal with this, Gligoric played f5. That's as good a move as any. There's basically no defense to this. White is going to win material one way or another. Here, let's back up. I was just curious for a second, why not just take the pawn? Knight takes. I guess there's still this threat. We still have this threat of knight f6, and also the threat of the rook. So knight takes, bishop takes, and white has opened up this diagonal for his queen, similar to the game. Okay, so anyway, f5 is one of the better defenses here. Allows white to execute his threat. He takes the pawn, hitting the queen and the rook simultaneously. Queen takes, and then he grabs the exchange here. Gligoric took back with the rook. It is possible to take back with the bishop as well, but it's about the same, amounts to about the same thing. After bishop takes, queen to c3. Once again, you know, the theme of these dark squares here, the queen is hopping on this diagonal, and it's going to be able to come in and cause trouble for the king. The king has to run to f7 already, and now let's see, bringing the rooks over, it looks like, is the best way to proceed from here. Anyway, Gligoric played rook takes, and now queen to c3 anyway, and then knight to e8 was played. This defends these two squares, so there's no immediate entry from the queen. The queen could go to h8 and grab a pawn. Reshevsky didn't play that. We're at this point we're at move 30, and like I said, he probably spent a long time calculating, so he's probably playing these moves quickly to get to the time control. Another characteristic of his play, you know, he gets in trouble trying to find these deep moves, and then he has to make reasonable moves fairly quickly to make the time control. So his idea is just to keep the position, keep his advantages, and make it to move 40. But just to look at it, if the queen had gone in for the check, drives the king to f7, can pick up another pawn here. It is a bit tricky. You can understand why he didn't necessarily analyze this all the way out. After this exchange, there are still a couple of pieces hanging, well, a pawn and a piece, so the move rook to c3 is forced to defend. But it just turns out white is still in good shape in this position. He's losing this pawn here, potentially, but he's got a good attack going. So that would have been best play for white. Like I said, Reshevsky played a move which is okay, just tries to hold on to things and make the time control. So the queen just defending the loose bits in his position here. But, well, Gligoric can get some activity. He doubles on the d-file. E-file. Doubles on the e-file, threatens the knight. The knight goes here, and now at least he picks up a pawn, and he can simplify a bit with rook takes, drive the king to the back rank. And he's doing okay here. I mean, white has the advantage, but black is still fighting. And it's not entirely settled. Oh, cancel. The king went to f8. Now rook to e1. There's a little dance with the rooks. Gligoric wants to keep the pieces on. That's his best chance for a draw, is to keep the material on. So rook here, goes back there. And now Reshevsky, of course, is not playing for a draw. He's playing for the win. He goes in with knight to f6. And then right here, we're on move 37 now. And, of course, Gligoric is probably under time pressure as well. His best move here is probably just to take the knight. Knight takes f6. Reshevsky doesn't have to take back right away. He can also throw in the move rook to d6, or he can take. But here, I'll just show this tactic. He can take here and fork the knight and the bishop, and stay material up this way. Knight to e4, and bishop takes, and I don't know. There's pawns hanging all over, but it looks like white comes out ahead in this line, or a simpler line would be just to take here immediately, and now what? Rook to e6, defending the pawn and dropping the bishop back, and also a slight edge for white in this position. But that would be the best the best way for black to struggle on. Instead, he played the move bishop to g7, possibly in time trouble. So here's your second chance. This is a little one. This one is a little bit easier. See if you can find the best move for Reshevsky for white in this position. Okay, he spots this one definitely. He plays knight takes h7 check, just picking up another pawn. The king goes to attack the knight. He can trade off bishops. This is how the game went. And then retreat his knight back to g5. And at this point, well, there were a couple more moves. Rook to e3 was played, attacking the pawn, and then rook to e1. And then Gligoric resigned at this point. He's going to lose the knight or force a trade, which would be an easily favorable endgame, easily winning endgame for white. He might have been planning to take on g3 with check, but then the king goes to some square that attacks the rook, and there's two pieces hanging, the rook and the knight, so there's no getting out of it that way. So at this point, Gligoric resigned, and that's how it ended. So with this win, Reshevsky is now in second place, tied with Bronstein. Also, Keres managed to draw in this round, and so all three of them, Bronstein, Keres, and Reshevsky, are tied for second place. And Smyslov is in clear first. He drew a quick game with Najdorf and clinched the tournament. So that's how things stand at the end of 29 rounds. So stay tuned for my coverage of round 30, and that one I will give the results and of the round, go over a game, and also talk about the this tournament a little bit in general, and the state of Soviet chess. This tournament is sort of a representative of the Soviet era in chess, so maybe that's a time to make some remarks on that topic. I will see you then. Bye.